Thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Incline Dodgers podcast. We are presented by TickPick and FanSided. We're really excited about today's episode because we are joined by one of the best in the business. I'm actually going to hand this over to Jake Reiner to give the proper introduction on this one.
Well, yeah, you guys all know who Bob Nightengale is, but in case you don't, he's a national baseball writer for USA Today, and he's been covering baseball since 1986. He's worked for the Kansas City Star, the Los Angeles Times, Sporting News, and has been with USA Today since 1998. And Bob, you have had quite the offseason, breaking a lot of news, holding other journalists accountable for their reporting. You've kind of been all over the map. So welcome to the Incline. What's been going on? What's the latest that you're hearing in the rumor mill in terms of free agents and potential trades?
Well, you're kind of just waiting now for the big free agents, whether it's a Blake Snell or Cody Bellinger, JD Martinez, Matt Chapman, it's about, Jorge Soler, about 6 guys still out there. You're kind of wondering where they're going. The big trade chip still, with the White Sox and Dylan Cease. At one time they thought they were going to get a deal with the Dodgers. Baltimore really never came through. They thought maybe Atlanta. Now they're talking Seattle. But I think, unless something really happens quick here, I think they're going to open the season with them and see what happens. Who knows? Maybe someone has an injury in spring training. They'll reach out and grab Dylan Cease.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time. We kind of felt that as though once Ohtani and Yamamoto signed, we were going to see this sort of avalanche of free agents being signed left and right, and we kind of haven't really seen that. It's been more of a slower process, sort of a slow drip. What do you attribute that to?
Well, the top 6 guys, Scott Boras still represents 5 of them, and he's always been very slow, methodical in getting what he wants. And a lot of times, I go back to 2018 winter, I think 5 guys signed after February. Some guys, Dallas Keuchel signed in June, but a lot of late signings. So really more attributes to that. It is a weaker free agent class. Throw away Ohtani and Yamamoto. It's just not the star-studded class that we're used to. So, yeah, I never believed that Yamamoto or Ohtani was holding it up just because there's so few teams that were actually in that price range.
Yeah. Before I pass it over to Kevin, I just one additional question. Since we are a Dodgers podcast, the Dodgers made the James Paxton signing official yesterday, so their rotation looks to be set. Their 40-man roster looks to be filled. What are your thoughts on the Dodgers roster as it stands, and do you envision them making any more moves before opening day?
I wouldn't think so, unless it's some reliever that falls in our lap before opening day. Otherwise, I don't see a big move. Everybody's always looking for relief help. I thought the Dodgers would have really put themselves over the top if they signed Josh Hader, but, they weren't going to put that kind of money in. I know they've been, looking around and you maybe get Kenley Jansen back, that sort of thing. I still think, Ryan Berger, I still think they'd like to get one more bullpen piece because it's a little shaky down there. You're just not sure, who's going to, close games out. So that might be their only little flaw at the moment.
Kev?
On that note, Bob, are the Dodgers linked to any other players that we haven't heard based off the current free agent class, or were they looking to make any additional moves? Are they happy with Manuel Margot? Do they want to try a reunion with Kike Hernandez? That's kind of what we've been hearing on Kike's side of things. Are there any other names that the Dodgers might be considering looking at?
No, Kike's name has been out there. I don't think he's getting what he thought he was going to get, so he may fall right in the Dodgers' laps. The Angels have been very interested in him as well. I think he ends up with one of the Southern California teams, and we'll see. We'll see about a Kenley Jansen, about bringing him back. They'd probably have to eat some of that money, the Red Sox would. So, maybe a piece like Kike Hernandez, but definitely I would think at least one reliever, at least one veteran reliever. Because I'm not sure how happy they'd be going into the season without that, that back in the bullpen being shaky.
Makes sense to me. What about around the rest of the NL West? The Giants, we've heard, maybe are looking at Matt Chapman. The Arizona Diamondbacks obviously just signed Jock Peterson. We had heard reports that maybe JD Martinez was a designated hitter they were looking at. And then you have the Padres, who are just in an interesting state right now where they can't really add big salaries. They traded Juan Soto to the Yankees. So just want to get kind of your thoughts if there's any other moves we should kind of keep our eye out on in the NL West.
Yeah, San Francisco's interesting. I would think Chapman falls in a lap. I don't see him necessarily going to the Cubs, and I don't see any other team really in on him. So he'd be a perfect fit there. They've been probably getting him at their price. Blake Snell have dabbled in. They say they don't want to go up that high a payroll. I think he's very possible going to end up with the Angels. Diamondbacks are pretty much done now. They thought JD Martinez's asking price was too high. Same with Justin Turner, so they went on the Peterson front. Padres have some money to spend, but they got so many holes. They've even been shopping, Kim out there trying to get something done. But they went for it for 2 years in a row, backfired, and now I think they're trying to kind of regroup, stay competitive, but almost try to sneak in the playoffs like the Diamondbacks did a year ago.
There's a strange corner of the Dodgers fandom who have been clamoring for a reunion with Cody Bellinger. And us here at the Incline Dodgers podcast, we don't believe that is going to happen given just the state of the Dodgers roster and how they've built it. What are you hearing on the Cody Bellinger front?
All I hear is the Cubs. The Blue Jays had some interest for a while, Giants a little bit, but it's been Cubs. I mean, he played so well for them. Other teams are saying, we kind of believe what the Dodgers do, that we're not sure if it's for real. He had a great season. We also had, 2-3 bad ones there at the end of LA. Dodgers had no interest in Bellinger. So, yeah, that's never going to happen. We'll see the real Cody Bellinger is. I think that's why he's still sitting out there because, he believes he's worked over $200 million and nobody else does. So the Cubs are sitting back and saying, we're not going to bid against ourselves. We'll just sit here and see what happens. Yankees had some interest for a while. This is months ago, but they were never going to pay him over $100 million.
It seems like both central divisions in the NL and the AL is kind of wide open-ish, so it would make sense for the Cubs to kind of go all in on someone like Bellinger. Kev, do you have any other rumor questions out there?
No, not in terms of rumors. I know that we were going to talk about the Shohei Ohtani news and stuff, so why don't I let you ask
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I just found it so fascinating, Bob, just looking at the landscape of where baseball journalism is at, where sports journalism is at. Kind of a crazy offseason when it came to the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes. There were a couple of reputable reporters that reported him on the plane to Toronto, signing with the Blue Jays, and then you're sitting here throwing out a tweet that no, Ohtani actually did not get on any plane. He's actually in Southern California at his home. What do you make of kind of the state of journalism in sports and in baseball is right now? What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Well, just people are being way too aggressive and taking chances without getting things confirmed. Back before social media, back before the internet, it was in the newspaper, and you better be right because that thing's sitting out there for a day. When you're right, you felt great because you had the story by yourself, and nobody could catch up for 24 hours. But if you're wrong, it was miserable. So people are very careful. Now people are just kind of firing things out there. The Ohtani thing, I remember even before the winter meetings, talking to his camp, saying, hey, you think any chance he's going to sign at the winter meetings? They said no. But some reports said, oh, he's going to sign at the winter meetings. So I kind of ignored it. And that morning, talking about Ohtani going to Toronto, talked to his camp. Is he on a plane? No, he's at home in Orange County in his pajamas. What are you talking about? and I let it fly. And then it wasn't until the another report says he signed with the Blue Jays, said, okay, no, he did not sign with the Blue Jays. Let it alone. And then later in the afternoon, I didn't realize that people were still, even a Dodger writer, saying, are you following this plane stuff? And I said, what are you talking about? I didn't realize that people were still believing that he was on a plane. And then it's like, okay, let me shut that down. Like, no, he's not on a plane. He was never on a plane. So just, I love the way they handled it. His agent, Nez Balolo and CA, is like, hey, we're going to keep our mouth shut. We're not going to say, all these teams are interested, where he's dining, where he's meeting. Some things, leaked out, like, okay, reporters saw him in San Francisco. Someone knew he was in the Florida at the Blue Jays spring training camp, but just kept things to themselves. And I love the way they announced it. Let Ohtani announce it himself, what you did is Instagram.
Yeah.
I was talking to Stan Kasten the other day, that, the CEO of the Dodgers. He said, we only knew 50 seconds ahead of time. He said, he called up Andrew Friedman, let him know. Friedman calls Kasten up. And he said 50 seconds later, Ohtani announced it himself. It was pretty cool to see it that way.
Yeah, that was really cool. And it's not what you see most often. And they did a really good job of kind of keeping things under wraps. When I just have a follow-up question to that, because as a reporter, as a national baseball writer, when you hear reports like Ohtani's going to Toronto or Ohtani's on the plane or anything like that, when there's a big name out there and it looks as if you may have gotten scooped in that regard, what kind of goes through your mind? Is it sort of like a panic mode to try and confirm that as fast as you can? Or you kind of just sit back and let kind of things fall where they may, and then, kind of slowly and methodically get the answer that you need?
I'll usually reach out pretty quick to see if it's true. And I remember a year ago with the Aaron Judge, supposed to be going to the Giants. Same thing, reached out to his agency immediately. They said, no truth at all. But, I'm not, instead of, embarrassing reporters, I'm not going to just shoot it down. I just know it's not true to myself. So it's not like I want to report, hey, this guy's wrong. Just, let them fix it themselves, or let people expose that it was wrong, rather than embarrassing someone else. But a lot of times, yeah, in these cases, say Bellinger signs with the Cubs, you reach out to the Cubs people or Scott Boras's people, hey, is this true? And they'll usually confirm it or deny it, within about a minute. So that's why you see all these confirmations that happen so fast now on all these signings.
Just had a quick follow-up to that I just thought of. So the way it kind of is in the NBA, for example, you've got like Woj and Shams, and they're kind of, battling it out between the two of them. And there's like such a competition of who can get it first, and, how fast can it get, all that stuff, right? Is there that same kind of rivalry that you have with like a Jeff Passan or a Ken Rosenthal or a John Heyman? Is there that kind of competition out there with sort of the bigger named baseball writers?
Yeah, and there's competition for sure. A lot of times you kind of know who's going to get the story depending who the agent is. Certain agents have great relationships with reporters, and you said, oh, you know what? I guarantee you right now, I got to get the 6 guys left. I can tell you who's going to break those stories. That sort of thing, unless something falls to the cracks. Because usually it's always 99% of these things are the agents that are leaking it. And I'm sure it's the same way in the NBA and NFL. So the people with the bigger platform certainly have an advantage, and certainly the platforms that are associated with the league. That's a rights holder. That's what I'm thinking about. The rights holders have an advantage because they want them to have those stories first as well.
Kind of to piggyback on Jake's question, I noticed that there's sometimes almost a simultaneous news break where you all have the same report. Do these sources kind of do like a group text sometimes, or is it just that coincidental?
No, a lot of times it is a group checks.
Okay.
Or
way,
text.
really?
Right. Yeah, it really is. I still remember I'm talking to someone. If I hear my phone buzzing or something, I usually, I don't answer it. Rude. I'll wait till at least the conversation's over, close to being over. I remember that happened to Albert Pujols. It was a group text. I think there were 3 of us. Knew that Pujols signed with the Angels, but I wasn't picking up my phone. I did. Oh, Pujols just signed. That sort of thing. So a lot of times, if it's not a group text, it's immediate. Like, okay, the agent will go, boom, 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 that sort of thing.
Got it. Good to know. My last question for you, Bob, if you're able to answer this, I was kind of curious over this last 10-year stretch, if there were any moves, whether it's a trade or a signing that the Dodgers were close to and it just kind of fell apart last minute?
I'm trying to think. Top of my head, as far as usually if they want a guy, they'll get him. But there's sometimes where just the price tag, went too high. Obviously, a couple of years ago, it was the Max Scherzer, Trey Turner thing. Remember, it was rumored was going to San Diego, with the Dodgers. But I'm not sure there's been a guy that, if I would have been Ohtani, that they would have been, and they didn't have a plan B, whatever it was, what they were going to do. I'm sure they would have signed JD Martinez, somebody he wanted. But usually, even a Corey Seager, not going to say they were really outbid by the Rangers, because the Rangers were much more aggressive than the Dodgers in that. Right. So, and I'm trying to think of trade-wise. I mean, they've been involved in some at the trade deadline, but they've been kind of reticent to trade away top prospects. That's why they still have such a great farm system. And the guys they do trade, really don't come back to haunt them. I mean, you look at that Mookie Betts trade. I mean, that's like the Babe Ruth trade again for the Red Sox. And it was just so one-sided. None of those guys, did anything.
Yeah,
definitely.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, last year at the trade deadline, it was confirmed that the Dodgers had traded for Eduardo Rodriguez, and obviously he vetoed the trade. I was always curious who the Dodgers had given up or names that were floated around in that deal, but obviously if you don't know, then it'll remain a mystery.
Yeah, no, I don't know. And usually those teams want to keep that quiet because they don't want to hurt the feelings of those young guys. But yeah, that's a rare case where usually if a team's trading out the no trade clause, they already know that he's going to waive it. It's like when, Texas got Max Scherzer last year, where the Mets reached out to Scherzer, will you be willing to accept a trade? And he took his time before deciding he would. Gary Sheffield back in the day, remember that trade with the Mike Piazza?
Yeah.
Where he was traded and the Dodgers didn't realize they had a no trade clause, and they had an extra $5 million for him to accept it.
Wow.
So in this case, the Tigers had no reason to believe that he wasn't going to accept a trade. And he wasn't budging. The Dodgers said, you know what, we're not going to give you any extra for coming. And that's why kind of surprising. He went to Arizona. He still came out west, but the only difference is now he's got time to move his family to Arizona, where the Dodger thing was more of a family situation with his family still being in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And then for those that don't know, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, you predicted the World Series winner 3 consecutive years in a row. Was it the Nationals through Astros those years?
Yeah. So I was definitely wrong last year. I was going to Atlanta again. I was going to Atlanta return. So this year I haven't decided yet. I tell you what, though, I know everybody talks about the Dodgers and different teams. Atlanta is still a juggernaut. I still think the National League pennant, goes through Atlanta. I mean, they're such a powerful team, and still got the Astros and Rangers in the West and the American League, and you can never discount the Phillies.
Yeah.
So I mean, the one thing I will say last year, when the playoffs started, I thought the Dodgers had no chance to get to the World Series. Just that pitching was in such disarray.
Yeah, that's fair.
It might have been Dave Roberts' best job to get 100 wins out of that team.
That is fair. What I was going to ask on that note, is there a team for the 2024 season that you kind of think more highly on than maybe the general public currently is on?
Like a sleeper team?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And nothing really comes to mind. I mean, sometimes America, Seattle, they always wonder about Seattle because they have that pitching. Is there a time when they'll turn it on? Philadelphia is not really a sleeper. I think Arizona will be better than people think. I'm not saying they'll return to the World Series, but I think people are picking them to win 84, 85 games. It's a better team than a year ago. And not that they're going to challenge the Dodgers, but I think people are kind of sleeping on them. I fully expect them to be, back in the playoffs. But if you're in the AL Central or NL Central, that's the divisions to be in because so many teams have a chance. Maybe if I'm really thinking about sleeper, I guess I'd say maybe the Cincinnati Reds. If that young rotation takes that next step and matures like 100 Green, they got a chance. I mean, they got a very young, talented team. So maybe of all the teams out there, that might be the sleeper.
Yeah, certainly in that NL Central, it's kind of wide open for them. You mentioned Gary Sheffield. I wanted to get your thoughts on this year's class of Hall of Famers. We had Joe Mauer, Todd Helton, and
Beltre.
and Beltre. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot that one. Beltre, Todd Helton, and Joe Mauer. Were they on your ballot? And if so, why do you think that they should be in? And who else did you have on your ballot?
Yeah, I had 7 guys. I definitely had Beltre. I mean, he had kind of a funny career. I was looking at the Dodgers, and he was coming up, and he was a superstar of the Dodgers. Then his career kind of tumbled in Seattle, rejuvenated in Boston, and then lights out in Texas. I bet he wears a Rangers cap.
Oh, yeah.
Todd Helton, I voted for the first time. I didn't think he belonged before Fred McGriff. I said, how's this guy hitting 360 home runs in Coors Field? Fred McGriff hits 493, and I just thought McGriff should have been in by the writers a long time ago. So once he got in, I said, okay, I'll vote for Helton. I did not vote for Joe Mauer. Not saying he doesn't deserve it, but I didn't think he was the first ballot Hall of Famer. The only first ballot guys, were Johnny Bench and Pudge Rodriguez. But he only caught 921 games. I mean, people are debating whether St. Louis, we got him, Molina should be in. He caught like 2,300 games and had more home runs and everything else. The only thing about him and Joe is that he had almost as many games at first base and DH. He was only averaging about 6 home runs a year, 50 ribbies. It's like, wait a minute now, I'm just not sure that qualifies for a first ballot. So voted for, it was those 2 guys, Gary Sheffield. I thought he was the most spirited hitter I covered outside of Barry Bonds. I mean, he was that good. Omar Vizquel was probably the controversial one. Obviously, he's got the sexual allegation lawsuit, the assault, along with domestic violence. I was at his house for 3 hours, and he told a story. At least he makes you think what was really true or not. Did vote for him. Voted for Andrew Jones for the first time. Jones was so bad in L.A., I think kind of clouded my judgment.
Yeah.
But, they won 10 Cy Youngs, and we're going to put Scott Rowland in with all his Cy Youngs. I'm sorry, Gold Gloves. How about Andrew Jones? But yeah, the Jones, just the way he hit a wall, particularly with the Dodgers. Like, oh my, I'm not sure about that one.
And to be honest, we were excited. I don't know about Kevin, but I was excited when the Dodgers signed Andrew Jones because of what he did in Atlanta. And then it was just a disaster.
Yeah, I think he showed up 25, 30 pounds overweight. And I mean, it was so bad that, released him about halfway, through the first year, when another year in the contract. And then Billy Wagner. I didn't vote for Wagner the first couple of years, but I have ever since, where he was striking out guys when guys were embarrassed to strike out. He was dominant. I mean, he wasn't dominant like a Trevor Hoffman or a Mario Rivera, but still dominant.
Mm-hmm.
What makes your, for example, you said you didn't, vote for some of these guys initially, but then over the years you decided to vote for them. What kind of changes over the years? Do their numbers all of a sudden look better to you a year later than they did a year before? I'm always curious about, kind of what changes in the mind of a writer.
Sometimes it's who gets in. And so Scott Rowland got in, I wasn't sure his numbers were good enough. I didn't vote for him. And when he got in, I said, well, look at Andrew Jones. And, then you're asking yourself, am I punishing him too much for, what he did at the end? If he had stopped playing, is he a Hall of Famer? Almost like a Buster Posey. He's going to get in with about 1,500 hits. But, he could have played more years. So we're going to punish Buster Posey for not, hanging around and playing for 3 or 4 years. So he'll get in. A lot of times just reevaluating. The Helton thing, it's like, okay, he didn't hit the home runs he should at Coors Field, so am I being too harsh in holding against him? But a lot of times just, I go by the eye test. If you ask me, hey, who's on your Hall of Fame that ballot the next 5 years, I can tell you who's going to be on it pretty much. It's like when people talking about Bobby Abreu because he had a high on base percentage, I wrote a column saying, did anybody, either writer, broadcaster, or fan, when they're watching Bobby Abreu, say I'm watching a future Hall of Famer? No, they didn't.
No.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about
Utley or Jimmy Rollins. I thought they're very good players.
Yeah.
But just fell short of Hall of Fame.
It's kind of how I feel about Carlos Beltran. I don't know if your opinion
I did vote for him.
Okay.
That was my 7th. I'm trying to think of what it was. The thing about him, I mean, I can see where you're saying that. I mean, he was a great switch hitter. The thing to me that kind of put at the top, he was an unbelievable clubhouse leader. Everyone was around. I mean, they just revered. And I do think it's unfair to punish him over the Astros scandal when he was just a player, where the two ringleaders, the two managers, are both back in action and managing. So, but I don't say Beltran was a slam dunk when I was watching him. Oh, I'm watching a future Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
But I always thought close, particularly the postseason too.
Where do you stand on the let's look at like the Astros scandal, for example, like, when Jose Altuve eventually gets on the ballot or Carlos Correa eventually gets on the ballot, where do you view those guys versus like the steroid guys, like the Bonds and the Maguires of the world?
Yeah, I'll vote for, Correa obviously, doesn't have the numbers. We'll see if he ever does. But I'll certainly vote for Altuve. I mean, just a player and part of it. The bottom line is there's been so much cheating scandals over the years. There's no doubt in my mind that there are at least 4 or 5 teams doing the same exact thing the Astros were doing. I'm not saying being a trash can, but using the cameras illegally. The Yankees got caught, the Red Sox got caught. So just not going to hold it against them. But with the PED guys, so I voted every year for Bonds and Clemens, because back then it was a wild, wild west. I mean, everybody was doing, I would say everybody, but 50% of the league were doing something because they weren't testing for it. It's like, hey, are you going to go 55 miles on the freeway when there's not going to be a cop for the next 30 miles? You're not. And I think that's what's happening. But where I draw the line demarcation is, now if you got caught, once they started testing in 2004 and you were, suspended, disciplined, hey, you're out. So I don't vote for Alex Rodriguez. Don't vote for a
Manny Ramirez.
Yeah, or anybody else that comes along, because bottom line is Bonds and Clemens only help their teams win. Where obviously A-Rod, crushed the Yankees by missing an entire season. And remember when Manny got popped with the Dodgers went downhill right after that happened.
Yeah, that was brutal.
So
right.
as long as once there are rules in place, then it's like, okay, you violate it because you hurt your team. I don't care if you're suspended for 5 days, you still hurt your team for 5 days. And the PDs back then were pretty widely accepted, where you actually wanted the GMs and managers actually liked their guys taking stuff, because those guys actually did things right. They trained right, went to bed, weren't hanging out late at night, eating it right. Those guys are actually the most dedicated guys around.
Interesting.
Cool. Well, that's all I got, Jake. Bob, I just wanted to commend your work. You've been one of my favorite follows ever since I really got into baseball. You crushed it a few years ago when we had that whole MLB lockout, and I believe you brought some bagels along. And
Good memory.
this year with the whole Ohtani madness thing, glad you could keep everyone in check.
So no, my pleasure. It'll be it's funny, like I was just telling a couple buddies, the last spring, I was probably in the Padres camp more than any other camp since I've been doing this job, at a national level, because of all the star power. And I said I'll be spending about 3/4 of my spring in Glendale this year with the Dodgers because of all that star power.
Yeah, because you want to cover the White Sox, right?
Right, exactly. That's it.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Bob. This was awesome. We loved your perspective and the work you've been doing. And good luck the rest of the offseason.
Sure, my pleasure. Great being with you guys, and have a great season.
All right. See you, Bob.
Thank you.
I know.